You might think that narcissists always want to be in control, that they'd never back down, apologize, or show any sign of submission. But here's something most people don't realize. When faced with someone who truly sees through their manipulation, someone like an empath, narcissists often choose to bow down instead of fight. Why? Because empaths have something narcissists deeply fear: emotional clarity, inner strength, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. And those traits make them incredibly hard to control. In today's video, we'll uncover 8 surprising reasons why a narcissist would rather submit to an empath than try to fight them, even if it means swallowing their pride or pretending to agree. This isn't about powerlessness. It's about understanding the invisible battle between two very different kinds of people, and why the one who appears softer on the surface actually holds the real strength. Stick around until the end, because this insight will help you understand not just narcissism, but your own emotional power too. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and give this video a thumbs up if you found value in it. We create content focused on psychology, emotional intelligence, personal growth, and healing after toxic relationships. Today's topic may sound a bit counterintuitive at first. Why would a narcissist ever bow down to someone else? But this insight comes from behavioral patterns observed by psychologists and therapists who work closely with individuals affected by narcissistic personality traits. So let's take a deeper look at the 8 reasons why a narcissist would rather submit to an empath than engage in a real fight, and what that tells us about how narcissists operate. Because they can't manipulate someone who sees through them. One of the biggest threats to a narcissist is someone who can clearly see past their charm, lies, and emotional games. Empaths naturally detect dishonesty. They feel energy, read between the lines, and sense when someone is trying to pull the strings behind the scenes. This makes it nearly impossible for a narcissist to manipulate an empath without being caught. And once a narcissist realizes their tactics aren't working, that their usual mind games are transparent, they often decide it's smarter to avoid confrontation altogether. Instead of trying to trick or dominate someone who sees right through them, they may pretend to agree, nod along, or even act respectful, just to keep things quiet and maintain some level of access. It's not submission in the traditional sense. It's strategy. They know they can't win against someone who doesn't fall for their tricks, so they opt for peace over conflict. 2. Because fighting an empath means losing control. Narcissists thrive on control. They need to feel like they're steering the conversation, shaping the emotions, and calling the shots. But when they go up against an empath, that control slips away. Empaths don't react emotionally the way others do. They don't get angry when provoked, scared when threatened, or confused when lied to. They stay grounded, centered, and unshaken, which completely disrupts the narcissist's usual playbook. Without that emotional reaction to feed off of, the narcissist has no leverage, no buttons to push, no chaos to create. So instead of escalating things into a full-blown fight, which they know they can't win, they often choose to step back and play nice. Not because they've changed, not because they respect you, but because fighting you means losing control, and that's something they simply can't handle. 3. Because empaths don't give them the emotional fuel they crave. At the core of every narcissist's behavior is a deep hunger for emotional fuel: admiration, attention, fear, anger, confusion, anything that confirms their influence over others. But empaths don't offer that kind of fuel. They don't get overly excited by praise. They don't chase validation, and they certainly don't give narcissists the dramatic emotional reactions they crave. This leaves narcissists feeling empty-handed. There's no drama to stir, no ego boost to gain, no emotional response to exploit. And when there's nothing left to take, many narcissists choose to walk away quietly, or at least pretend to behave, rather than waste energy on someone who won't give them what they want. It's not respect, it's frustration. They're used to getting a reaction. When they don't, they lose interest, and sometimes that looks like submission. 4. Because empaths don't play their games, and that confuses them. Narcissists rely on a set of predictable psychological tactics: gaslighting, guilt-tripping, triangulation, love bombing, silent treatment. The list goes on. These tactics work because most people respond emotionally, try to reason, or attempt to fix the relationship, but empaths often don't fall into those traps. They recognize the games, they refuse to participate, and instead of trying to win, they simply disengage or respond with calm clarity. This throws narcissists off balance. They expect resistance, drama, or emotional outbursts, not silence, compassion, or detachment. And when things don't go according to plan, they start questioning whether they're in control anymore. That uncertainty makes them cautious. They begin to wonder, is this person immune to my influence? Do they see me for who I really am? Rather than risk exposure or confrontation, many narcissists choose to retreat, or at least appear cooperative, just to avoid further disruption. Because empaths don't react the way others do, and that threatens them. Most people, when faced with narcissistic behavior, tend to react in predictable ways: confusion, sadness, or anger being the most common. These emotional responses are exactly what narcissists expect and know how to handle. They use them to their advantage, feeding off the reactions to maintain control, create drama, or manipulate the situation in their favor. But empaths don't fall into that pattern. They respond differently, and that's what makes them so difficult for a narcissist to handle. When insulted, an empath doesn't lash out or break down. Instead, they remain calm, centered, and emotionally grounded. When attacked, they often respond with compassion rather than retaliation, choosing understanding over hostility. And when things become toxic or unproductive, they walk away, not with screaming or begging, but with quiet dignity and clarity. This kind of response, or rather lack of the expected emotional reaction, completely throws the narcissist off balance. It disrupts their usual playbook and leaves them without the fuel they need to continue manipulating the situation. For a narcissist, emotional engagement is everything. They thrive on chaos, conflict, and emotional highs and lows. But when they encounter someone who doesn't react the way they expect, someone who doesn't get angry when provoked, cry when criticized, or panic when threatened, it creates a sense of uncertainty they deeply dislike. This absence of reaction unsettles them in ways they may not even fully understand. It causes them to question their own influence and power. It makes them wonder if their words still matter, if their presence still affects others the way they used to believe. More than that, it makes them feel powerless. Because without the emotional feedback they rely on, they have no way to measure their impact. They can't tell if they're winning, hurting, or controlling, and that uncertainty eats away at their confidence. It also makes them feel invisible, not physically unseen but emotionally ignored. The empath isn't impressed by their performance, isn't intimidated by their tactics, and isn't drawn into their games. This indifference strips the narcissist of their usual tools of manipulation, leaving them with nothing to work with. And when that happens, when they realize they can't provoke a reaction, stir up drama, or regain control, many narcissists choose to disengage. They lower their heads, stop pushing buttons, and either walk away quietly or pretend to behave themselves. They aren't backing down out of respect or remorse. They're simply recognizing that this particular battle isn't winnable. Against someone who refuses to play their game, fighting serves no purpose, because they know they can't win. 6. Because empaths reflect truth, and narcissists hate facing reality, empaths have a natural ability to reflect truth, not just to others, but to themselves as well. They don't lie to protect feelings. They don't distort reality to avoid discomfort. And they don't sugarcoat the truth just to keep the peace. This honesty creates a mirror that narcissists find deeply uncomfortable. Because when they're around someone who speaks with integrity and clarity, they start to see the cracks in their own carefully built image. They hear truths they don't want to acknowledge, they witness behaviors they'd rather ignore, and they feel the weight of their own inconsistencies. Faced with this reflection, many narcissists instinctively recoil. They don't want to confront their flaws, they don't want to face accountability, and they certainly don't want to admit that someone else sees them more clearly than they see themselves. So instead of engaging in a fight that could force them to face these truths, they often choose to back down, at least temporarily, just to avoid the discomfort of being exposed. 7. Because empaths don't fear them, and that takes away their power. Fear is one of the most powerful tools narcissists rely on to maintain control over others. It's a core part of their emotional manipulation strategy, not because they necessarily intend to harm people physically, but because they know how much emotional power fear can give them. They understand that if they can make someone afraid, truly afraid of what might happen if they don't comply, they can get that person to do almost anything. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of public humiliation, or even fear of emotional pain are all tactics they use to keep people in line and under their influence. Most people respond to these threats with anxiety, hesitation, or compliance, exactly what the narcissist wants. That reaction fuels their sense of control and reinforces their belief that they are in charge of the emotional dynamics in any relationship. But when they encounter an empath, that dynamic breaks down. Empaths experience emotions deeply, including pain, sadness, disappointment, and even moments of hurt. But fear, real, paralyzing fear of the narcissist, that's something they rarely feel. Because empaths tend to see through the surface and into the deeper emotional layers of a person, they often recognize what's really driving the narcissist. Deep insecurity, unresolved trauma, and an internal emptiness they try to fill through control and dominance. Empaths understand that the narcissist's cruelty isn't a sign of strength, it's a mask for weakness. They see that the threats, the outbursts, the cold silences, they're all just attempts to regain power in a world where the narcissist constantly feels unstable. And once you understand that, fear begins to lose its grip. When someone sees through the performance, recognizes the fragility beneath the surface, and refuses to be intimidated by it, the narcissist loses one of their most effective weapons. Without the ability to instill fear, they can't manipulate the same way. They can't push buttons that don't react. They can't create panic in someone who remains calm. And they certainly can't control someone who isn't afraid of being abandoned, criticized, or emotionally punished. This lack of fear from the empath completely undermines the narcissist's usual method of control. It disrupts the entire system they've built around managing relationships through intimidation and emotional pressure. And when that happens, many narcissists instinctively shift gears. They may stop trying to provoke a reaction. They may lower their tone, avoid confrontation, or even pretend to behave respectfully, not because they've changed or grown, but because they realize they can't scare the empath into submission. They know they've met someone who isn't afraid of them, and for a person who relies on fear to stay in control, that's a deeply unsettling realization. It leaves them feeling powerless, confused, and unsure of how to proceed. So instead of fighting, they often choose to back down, at least temporarily, because they finally understand something most people never show them. That true emotional strength doesn't come from intimidation. It comes from standing tall without needing to tear others down. And that's a power they simply can't match. 8. Because deep down, narcissists respect strength, even if they can't admit it. Despite everything, the manipulation, the lies, the emotional warfare they engage in, so effortlessly, narcissists still carry a quiet subconscious respect for something they rarely understand or experience themselves. True strength. They won't show it. They won't admit it out loud. In fact, they may even try to deny it, even to themselves. But somewhere deep inside, beyond the layers of ego, defense mechanisms, and self-protection, they recognize that empaths possess a kind of inner power they can never fully grasp. It's not the kind of strength that shouts or demands attention. It's not built on dominance, control, or the ability to overpower others. It's quieter, deeper, and far more resilient. Empaths have the strength to remain grounded when chaos swirls around them. They can forgive without forgetting, choosing peace over resentment without losing their clarity. They walk away from toxic situations without looking back in regret, and they heal deeply, completely without seeking revenge or trying to hurt the person who wronged them. This level of emotional maturity is not only rare, it's intimidating to a narcissist, because it directly challenges everything they believe about human behavior and relationships. To them, life is a constant battle for control, a game where survival depends on staying ahead, staying strong, and never showing weakness. But then they encounter someone like an empath, someone who doesn't play by those rules, who doesn't fight for power because they already feel whole within themselves, someone who isn't threatened by conflict but chooses detachment instead, someone who doesn't seek validation from others because they already know their own worth. That kind of presence shakes the foundation of the narcissist's worldview. It shows them that real strength doesn't come from manipulation, fear, or control. It comes from inner peace, from self-awareness, from the courage to be vulnerable without being destroyed by it. And when they see this quality in an empath, when they witness it firsthand, many narcissists respond in a way most people wouldn't expect. They instinctively tone down their aggression. They speak more gently, as if walking on fragile ground. They avoid provoking unnecessary conflict, sensing that their usual tactics won't land the way they usually do. Sometimes they may even treat the empath with unexpected kindness, not out of love or affection, but out of a deep, unspoken recognition of someone they cannot dominate or manipulate. It's not admiration in the traditional sense. It's more like a silent acknowledgement of strength they can't match. Because in the narcissist world, where power equals survival, someone who doesn't need power to feel complete is both confusing and strangely compelling. It leaves them unsettled, unsure of how to respond, because for the first time, they're faced with someone who isn't afraid of them, isn't impressed by them, and isn't emotionally invested in winning. And in a world where they've always believed control was the only path to safety, encountering someone who has found peace without it is something they don't quite know how to process. So they bow down not in words, not in apology, but in action. They shift their behavior, lower their defenses, and step back from the fight, not because they've changed, but because they recognize, however unconsciously, that they're standing in the presence of something greater than themselves. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you found this helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and hitting that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Understanding why a narcissist would rather bow down and submit to an empath than fight them gives you valuable insight into the dynamics of emotional power and control. It also reminds you that strength doesn't always look loud or aggressive. Sometimes it looks like calmness, compassion, detachment, and the quiet confidence to walk away without needing approval. If you've ever felt confused about why a narcissist suddenly started acting respectful or avoided confrontation with you, now you know. It's not weakness on their part. It's recognition, however, unconscious, that they can't match your emotional strength. And that's something worth celebrating. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, drop a comment below and let us know what other topics you'd like us to cover. Also, don't forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from hearing this perspective. Healing from toxic relationships is hard, but knowledge is power, and awareness is the first step toward breaking free. Thank you again for being here. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.